Minister, can we start with the story over the weekend? Two youths used a hammer and a crowbar to smash an elderly man in his Napier home while he slept in bed in an attack that nearly killed him. They're not being sent to jail. The judge said, and I'm paraphrasing here, the judge said the youths had a better future in the community than behind bars because one had found work and was active in the community. But as Justice Minister, though, is it your expectation that serious, and this was a violent crime, do serious and violent crimes, should they result in jail?
Chris, thanks. Look, I think that what we New Zealanders read in the paper this morning was incredibly upsetting because we have an expectation that those that do harm to others are penalised. And ordinarily, I wouldn't comment on a case like this because it's before the youth court, but I know that because it's the judge in this instance allowed for some of the details to be published because I understand knew it would be in the public interest to do so. My job, and I think what a government should be doing in these circumstances, ensuring that those that cause harm to others are penalised and appropriately penalised. But probably the key consideration for me is that we put in place penalties that reduce harm over the course of that person's lifetime. That's why there has been different approaches taken to younger people. Now, young people who get caught up in the youth justice system, 95% of them come from family violence within their homes. And I see that was certainly the case here. Sir Peter Gluckman, he was the Chief Science Advisor to the former Prime Minister, John Key. He said that those that go into a jail are on the fast-track trajectory into gang life. And I think ultimately that's what that judge was essentially saying. If she was to incarcerate those young people, would they create more harm in the long run to New Zealanders? We have to be able to make sure that we have the ability to hold those young people to account. I don't know what the ultimate sentences are that they receive, but that's the key consideration for me. With those young people who commit offences, horrific offending, we as a state have to be able to make sure that in their lifetime, that we minimise the amount of harm that they cause and that we have appropriate measures in place. So that's my expectation.
The trouble with that statement, I guess, is what people may hear from that is the offenders have no punishment. There are no consequences for these crimes, even as heinous as this violent offence. And I put it to you, that's why we're experiencing an increase of ram raids and youth crime, because these youths simply know they can get away with it, Minister.
I probably will rebut that to an extent. There's two parts here. The first is that we New Zealanders absolutely have the right to feel that that any person, young or old, is held accountable for their actions. Like I said, I don't know the full extent of the penalty that was imposed on those two young people. I know, though, however, that it wasn't one of incarceration. What we do have to make sure is that these young people, and this is the approach that we've taken, and it's the approach that we're seeing as work, we're having to make interventions earlier in these young people's lives. I have an expectation, we as a government have an expectation that there is a quick response to those young people that cause harm in particular. What we said, now that I go back to Sir Peter Gluckman because he wrote this intensive report on criminal offending in New Zealand. There is no correlation, he said, between incarceration, those people that are incarcerated and the rates of crime. The two operate quite independently. The second thing he said is that those that go into jail younger, are more likely to create more harm over the course of their lifetimes. So that's why people like myself, it's easy to just say, yeah, crack on, get tough on crimes, let's create more kid prisons. That's an easy statement. But does it reduce harm for New Zealanders in the lifetime? The evidence says no. And that's what I have to look at as the Minister for Justice. What works? What will keep New Zealanders safe? That is by doing things like making sure we have intensive interventions as soon as a young person creates any harm in the community. We need to feel assured that they have the full wraparound consequences but also interventions to get them back onto a pathway that does something a little bit better. One of those kids that I saw, or what was reported in the paper anyway, was that it looked like he'd been engaged in a Jobs for Nature program, which is something the government has funded through $500 million has been invested in to get young people, often people that haven't been able to have a good start to life, into forms of work, being accountable as a responsible citizen. Again, it comes with a lot of pastoral wraparound care. It looked like this young person, as through the public reporting, had said he'd gone essentially from doing nothing every single day, smoking cannabis, living a life of crime. However, he'd been employed for the past year and a half or so in one of those Jobs for Nature programs with that intensive wraparound. Now he's a tax-paying citizen. So I think those are the kinds of things that we are looking at doing. What works, what keeps New Zealanders safe, and we have to look at that over the course of a lifetime.
In December, the government introduced this circuit breaker program aimed, as you say, it's a wraparound service support. When the kids do a ram raid, they get different, multiple agencies that go at them, and it is aimed at addressing child offenders. So when will you know if this program has been successful?
What we do know already is that, and we're monitoring very closely, Chris, the outcomes of that early intervention circuit breaker program. What we have seen is that around about 70% of those young people that are going through that circuit breaker program have not gone on to reoffend. Now, that's in stark contrast to the numbers that we were seeing prior, where over 50% of those caught in their first instance were going on to reoffend. So look, we're monitoring that really closely, and you'll see that in the budget just recently announced that we're extending that program because we are seeing that it works.
Is that going to be is that currently in Christchurch?
It's not currently in Christchurch, although I do know that the police minister is advocating very hard to make sure that Christchurch is getting the right attention that it needs. And I certainly have been watching the youth crime results down in Christchurch. It's one area that gives me cause for concern. I look at where we have made those other interventions, and we've seen gone from seeing a stark increase to a stark drop as soon as those intervention measures were put in place. Christchurch was an area that didn't receive that intervention program, but we haven't seen the reduction. So I almost use that as a clear case for how we can see that those early intervention programs are working, and there's more discussion, I think, that certainly needs to be had for Christchurch.
Minister, I've spoken to, I'm trying to think now, 5 sets of parents of kids that have gone on to commit ram raids and burglaries and serious crimes. They are beside themselves. They've said to me they are scared about their kid dying, but also members of the public dying because of their children's behaviour, because they are under the so-called age. Nothing can happen to them. They can't be put in any youth justice facility. One offender was as young as 9 years of age, and all police can do with him is simply put him in the police car after he's committed the ram raid and takes him back home to mummy, and he does it again. So do you accept that there's something, there are youths that are falling through the cracks where there's no help for them or their families, according to what these families are telling me?
Yeah, I think that those anecdotal evidence and statements you're hearing certainly reflects what I'm hearing as well. And like I said earlier, 95% of those young people that have been caught for ram raiding type offences are already known to the police as a consequence of family violence within their own home. And that's through a singular incident. When, you look down to those that have been called out to their homes, 5 or more incidents because of violence in their homes, that's really the background where most of these kids are coming from. We know that. And I think that there is certainly strength in the statement that says, look, maybe not for first-time offenders, but secondly, once we start to see them at that second and third, I'm proactively looking at whether or not the response that is able to be provided by not just the police, but also all of those other agencies, including youth justice facilities, whether we've quite got the balance right. One thing I will say, Chris, is that the number, we can almost isolate it down to the number of kids who are at that serious repeat level. The ones that are doing 2, 3, 4 types of ram raids and have been caught, it's a really small number. And so I think that particular for that cohort, We made some swift interventions about 4 months ago. Those worked, and I think that we'll be looking to extend those.
You're right, it is a small number, but the small number can cause massive damage. And I'll give you an example in Christchurch. Last week, 2 youths, well known to police, went on a joyride across Canterbury, driving down, the motorway and the wrong way, driving dangerously close to pedestrians. Police could only, in some respects, stand back, and they had to charter a commercial helicopter to try and locate or keep observations on these youths. Now, it's transpired that one of the youths is a well-known youth offender with at least 80 charges to his name, and that's as a result of November last year. Of course, we can't say too much more than that because the person is a youth and is probably before the youth court now. But doesn't that say that something's not working if this person can have 80 charges to their name in November or such last year, and then they are still out committing crimes and making people on the roads of Christchurch feel unsafe?
Chris, absolutely. I absolutely agree with you there. I think that it's those types of offenders, those ones that have been dealt, that are causing immeasurable amounts of harm. Clearly, that's an ongoing recidivist offender. I guess the challenge that we've got ahead of us right now is looking at what do we do with about 80 kids across the country that are of that ilk. Now the question that we've all been seeking from agencies is why aren't we being able to capture them in a different way and make sure that they're not going on to cause immeasurable amounts of harm to our communities?
And what is the answer then? What can we do? I mean, if this chap continues to do this, what is your expectation as Justice Minister? So both youths were arrested on the side of the Southern Motorway. I don't think anybody wants to hear about these youths ever again because they are causing so much harm to the community. So as Justice Minister, what would your expectation be to make sure that they don't commit a crime or put any member of Christchurch public in harm's way ever again?
Look, without knowing the full details of the case, I can say at a higher level, my expectation is that the state should have a strong grip over the lives of those young people. It should be intertwined in every part of their daily activities, strongly holding and locking them down, making significant interventions. I'm talking about 8 to 12 hours a day of those young people being literally put into the right kind of environment, because it's very clear. If you've got young people doing that type of offending, 80 types of offences, I think you said, within last year or so, look, so the home is broken down, right? So they've lost control in the home, don't know what kind of home. Like I said, 95% of these kids come from violent homes. So we know that that home isn't the right environment for them. But what I've asked from our agencies is to tell me why the right environments aren't being provided. And for kids like that, we need to be able to make stronger interventions.
Minister, there's conflicting data on what crime in New Zealand has gone up. So instead of me spouting off numbers and data that seems to conflict with each other, what have you seen from your advisors and what does it tell us? What crime has gone up in New Zealand from your point of view?
Yeah, from my point of view, what I've seen go up over the last 2 years, really. It's really since post-COVID. We've seen younger people committing a more violent ram raiding type offences. That's gone up significantly. What we've seen over the course of the last 5 years, though, is that where the crime rates are right now, they kind of are about equal to where they were in 2017. And if you were to look at over the last 10 years, we've seen a substantive reduction, and that's indeed what we've seen across comparable jurisdictions like Australia and Canada. I look to Australia and Canada as well. They are seeing a significant uptick in ram raid type offending, and they've also seen a significant uptick in crime since COVID and the interventions that were made there. It shows me that there's a significant enough issue that New Zealanders can rightly expect that there are particular bespoke interventions being made to bring the curve back down. I guess what I'll also make the observation is that in New Zealand, we incarcerate, we'll chuck people into jail more so than most other countries that we like to compare ourselves. We throw more people into jail than they do in Australia, than they do in Canada, than they do in Finland, Sweden, Germany, most other countries that we like to compare ourselves to. People that put other countries that chuck more people in jail, China, Mexico, South Africa. So that's, I guess, and one of the things that Sir Peter Gluckman also said, that he compared us to Finland. They're similar size population, but they have a far lower rate, and they have a similar amount of crime. They have a far lower rate of incarceration, and they have invested a lot more into dealing with recidivist offending through these types of interventions we're doing right now, this prevention stuff. Now, despite the fact that we throw more people in jail, New Zealanders feel less safe in New Zealand than they do in Finland, that has the same amount of crime as what we do. So therefore, what Peter Gluckman said is, it doesn't matter how many more people we chuck into jail, New Zealanders won't necessarily feel safer. What we have to do is tackle that from a younger age. We need to tackle and make sure we're putting in the right interventions. And even though, look, I could go out and political point score and say, I'm going to chuck in, $500 million into kiddie jails and stuff like that. But we know that that's just a recipe for gangs to recruit members. I don't want to be responsible for that. I just don't. What I do want to be responsible for is being a good governor of the justice system that ultimately sees less harm by these troubled younger individuals over the course of their lifetime. And I think that's what New Zealanders expect from me.
When Poto Williams was police minister, I asked her why she thought there was an increase in youth crime, and she said 2 words, TikTok. She was laughed at for that comment, but I think she's 100% right. Some of these perpetrators seek fame through TikTok, and I've seen multiple examples where these ram raiders in Christchurch want fame and they film their crimes on TikTok. In fact, one criminal recently filmed himself driving through or smashing through Hornby Mall, and it made it to TikTok. So Poto Williams was right. The fame and notoriety that these kids get from social media doesn't help, does it? Just fine.
I think, look, that's one of the trends we've seen in youth crime since time immemorial. When I was growing up, we didn't have social media, but so the big offence at that time was tagging, right? And you got notoriety by writing your name and paint all over buildings and stuff like that. But it equated to the fame. The modern day tagging, I guess, right now is videos that they put up onto social media and garner some form of attention, notoriety. It's quite a hard area to regulate. You'll see that, we've done some work there. The former Prime Minister did that with the Christchurch Hall, working with social media companies, etc., to limit people being able to garner notoriety from their criminal offending. But it's pretty tricky to be able to crack down ultimately in that area. It's something we need to work with. And like I said, make the right interventions. And I think that we probably, I think now that we've got a significant enough evidence base to show us what is working and what's not, we can make further decisions that will help protect New Zealanders.
Just finally, Minister, I think it's fair to say that when I now go and park my car in central Christchurch or whenever I'm out and about, I feel uneasy. And I think I speak on many people in Christchurch now. There is a sense of unease with the level of crime we're seeing, whether it's retail, violent crime, crime in general. And I think that, I watched a Q&A the other day, and they were interviewing residents across Christchurch, and the number one concern was they felt unsafe. We feel unsafe. So as Justice Minister, give us some reassurance as to what the government's going to do, because there are people watching this saying Labour's soft on crime. And what is it that you can do as Justice Minister to give us reassurance that the government's doing everything it can to make the citizens of Christchurch and across New Zealand feel safe?
Several things. We have invested over the last 5 years over $1 billion into our justice system. We've increased the number of police, and that's a growing trajectory as well. But really, I think there's something in Peter Gluckman's report that struck me. Despite the fact that New Zealand throws away a lot of people into jail, it doesn't make us feel safer. So if I look to countries like Finland, where they've got those similar types of criminal offending, they feel safer, even though there's not more and more people being chucked in jail. So there's something for us to take away from that. Are we dealing with our criminals in the right way? New Zealanders rightly deserve accountability. But like I said, I don't think that these yarns around soft on crime, tough on crime have helped us as a country and has helped us be safer in terms of the types of policies that we can implement. The stuff that works, making sure that we grip those young kids up who are living in pretty unsafe environments, that stuff works. We've seen it up and down the country. So I guess seek from your listeners there, Chris, look at the types of stuff that works. We don't want New Zealanders feeling unsafe. And there's a real big challenge with it right now, and it's been this way in New Zealand for some time, about how we talk about effective measures. What works when it comes to cracking down on crime? Is it locking people up and throwing away the key? Ultimately, we have to deal with those people who come out into our community pretty soon thereafter. And after that time, they've made a whole ton of mates from a whole ton of gangs. They've gone essentially into the university of crime. Does that make New Zealanders feel safer? The evidence that we have shows it doesn't. So look, I am committed to making sure that we are really dealing to those young recidivist offenders that need to be dealt with. And that's where I'm looking at terms of options to give police and those other agencies that have a role to be able to make those interventions to crack through. New Zealanders rightly deserve that, but we've got to make the right interventions, and that's all I'm asking from your listeners today. Trust the evidence.
Justice Minister Kiri Allan, nice to have you on the program. Thank you for your time.
Cheers, Chris. Take care.